Namaskar. Good evening. Today is 18th day of ICR National Institute of Agricultural Economics and Policy Research webinar series on quantitative methods for social sciences. This is last day of this webinar series, and your kind support and active participation gave us strength to complete this webinar series with same enthusiasm as it was in the beginning. Thank you very much for your support. Myself, Vinayak Nikam, and my co-host, Dr. Abhimanyu, welcome you all in today's session. Today, we will learn about computable general equilibrium model, its theory as well as application part. And this lecture will be followed by a remark by Dr. Suresh Pal, Director NIAP, about this webinar series. Now, I request my co-host, Dr. Abhimanyu, to introduce the speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Vinayak Nikam. Good evening to all. For today's lecture, we have with us Dr. Varun Dev Pal. He is Project Manager at International Food Policy Research Institute, New Delhi. Prior to IFRI, he has also worked for National Council of Applied Economics Research, New Delhi. Dr. Varun Dev is mainly working on impact of climate smart agriculture, watershed management, and land use modeling. He is expert in computable general equilibrium modeling and macroeconomic modeling. Now I request Varun sir to start his lecture.
Thank you, Dr. Manu, and thank you, Dr. Vinayak, for giving me this opportunity. And I take this opportunity to thank ICAR, National Institute of Agriculture and Policy, for organizing such beautiful event. And although I understand that this is the last day, and I hope all the participants enjoyed this event, and I congratulate the organizer for organizing such event and this great success. Today, the topic I plan to talk about, which Dr. Abhimanyu already mentioned, and Dr. Vinayak also said, that the computable general equilibrium modeling for policy analysis. So let me start with that. So I cannot say
Yes, you can share it, sir.
Okay. So is it visible to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let me start with this webinar with the topic, as we mentioned, about the computable general equilibrium model theory and application. Broadly, we will try to capture three major issues related to this particular technique, or you can say methodology, for policy research in economics. The first, we will try to understand the input-output framework and its application. Second, we will try to understand the supply-use table framework of input-output table, or you can say the matrix representation of the economy. And the last and third one, we will try to understand the circular flow of income and the social accounting matrix multiplier. And further to that, we will try to see how different policy simulation can be done using this social accounting matrix framework. Why it is, although we are limiting our analysis with input, output, supply use table, and social accounting matrix, still we are saying it's a computable general equilibrium model, because these three instruments are basic to the computable general equilibrium model. Computable general equilibrium model is a nonlinear framework of data analysis, where we capture the structure of Indian economy in nonlinear simultaneous equation framework. Before we understand the nonlinear equation framework, we need to understand the linear form of it. And the linear form of it is nothing but this input, output, and supply use table and social accounting matrix format. These three names are different, and their significance are also different, and their basic characteristics are also different. So let us start with that. So when we talk about policy, there are very often we ask this question: how can we know the impact of a policy before it is implemented? So it is really a crucial challenge, a crucial research question for every policymaker, every scientist, every researcher, that how we can get it. There are three ways to answer this question. First is that draw on experience of other countries and time. Let us say we want to implement some policy and we have some experience about other countries. But question comes, is the context of the other country is relevant for the context of our country, of our concern? Second is that draw on theory. What economic theory said, like if we talk about demand theory, so it talks about that if price increases, if consumer will consume less. But how does this generic theory can be applied in the current context? Because this theory should be a context specific, and we need basically an empirical evidence of this theory as well. So finally, the applied model which we use to create evidence of the what I would say the theory, economic theory which are relevant for a particular policy. So finally, we have to develop a model according to the context we are concerned. So this is the brief background note why our policy modeling is important, and how or why we should move from theory towards the more on the empirical evidences. Now, what types of model is there, or how we can do that? There are different types of model we have heard about. First is, say, partial equilibrium model, which we all may be familiar if we are all working on agriculture sector. So that means agriculture is the only one sector among many other economic activities within an economy. So if you're talking about agriculture sector, so that means we are talking about a partial equilibrium situation. So if farmer produce, how much they will produce, at what price they will sell. Now, further to a particular one sector to a multi-sector, we gradually move towards economy-wide framework. Economy-wide, basically there are two types of modeling. One is a macroeconomic, that is more like an aggregate of all the sector. Oh, in economic theory, most of our economic students, they used to read aggregate demand and aggregate supply. That is ISLM model, that is largely on macroeconomic modeling. Then we have another is a multi-sector model. The multi-sector model is a micro foundation of macroeconomics. Basically, here we have disaggregated statement or disaggregation of all the aggregated economic activities. For example, we have multiple sector: agriculture, manufacturing, construction, other, and how they are interrelated to each other can be captured using this multi-sector model. And this is more detailed than the aggregated model. Another approach or another modeling approach is econometric model. We have historical data we try to establish the causal relationship between the dependent and independent variables, and then we try to understand whether the policy or whether the policy acted properly or what will happen. Then another approach is also calibrated approach. Like suppose we know what is the elasticity parameter for a demand function. So if we know that, then we can calibrate what would be the level of demand if the price changes by certain unit, or what would be the intercept of the demand. On the other hand, suppose you have both the parameter for a demand function, that is shift parameter, that is suppose let us consider a demand function alpha minus beta p, then you have alpha plus beta information are there. So if you change alpha, then what will happen with your demand? Like if your demand curve shift upward or downward, then what will happen on the aggregate demand? So these are the different technique of doing the modeling. Then we have also forecasting or simulation model. Many of you are aware about the forecasting using econometric method. And simulation is basically we set up a model and then we change some parameter to get the outcome or output parameter. Then we have dynamic and static. That is basically purposive. Purposive in a sense, whether you want to see a short run phenomena or you want to see a long run phenomena. like a policy you want to take, you have a target, say after 10 or 20 years, you want to achieve your economic system up to a certain level. That is a long run kind of a planning you want to do, and you want to change your policy on different point of time. Static is basically a single year, and you want to simulate your model for particular year. But issue is that there may be different model, but all these model can contribute on the policy analysis to some extent. So is there any comment? Okay. So in our particular discussion, we will be more concerned with an economy-wide framework that are multi-sectoral, calibrated, static, and simulation. So these 4 characteristics we will be talking about in this particular discussion. So what is an economy-wide framework? The economy-wide framework, as we name it economy-wide, it implies that the model is considers economy as a whole. That means it is a more disaggregated than in the macroeconomic we talk about aggregate demand and supply. The structure, it considers structure. Structure in a sense, the industrial structure. How the industries are linked to each and every industries. For example, we have say paper and paper product industry, food processing industries, we have a transport industry, we have other service sector as well. So these multiple sectors are interlinked to each other. If we can take an example of value chain analysis, we know that a farmer in the field, they grow the crop and then it sell into the market. But from his field to the market, he needs to depend on the transport industry. If transport facility is well, he needs to pay less as compared to when there is no transport facility. So this is how every stages there is a linkage from multiple industries. So that is how we explain the structure. Then we have labor market into it. Labor market means what is the level of labor demand by different sector and what is the total labor supply into the economy. That means if an economy grows or if a particular sector grow, how much additional labor that sector will demand and how much basically employment we are creating for the economy as a whole. Then we talk about income distribution. Since we have labor market, so the labor supplier, that is household, will earn money from their labor supply and they will earn income. So it depends on the which sector they are in. Let us take an example that in India, there are more than 40% people are dependent on agriculture sector for their livelihood, and remaining are dependent on the secondary and tertiary sector. Among them, few of them are in the high paid job and most of them are say low paid job. That's how we get to know what is the distribution of income of the households and how they are dependent on every sector. So if there is an employment opportunity for high paid job increases, then poor lower income segment people will get opportunity to go into the high paid job gradually. And that's how we can reach to a different level of income distribution. Whether equal distribution or unequal distribution, that your data will speak. But that is how we link income distribution with labor market and the industrial structure. Then different types of household we take into account. Different types of household in the sense, whether they are agriculturally self-employed, whether they are casual labor, whether they are non-agricultural self-employed, whether they are regular wage employee. So it depends on different types of households. It basically gives us an idea how different households are dependent on different sectors. But in this economy-wide modeling framework, although we are talking about multi-sectoral framework, which is slightly different than macroeconomic framework, but we cannot ignore the macroeconomic constant. The 2 constants are there. One is adding up, another is national account as a benchmark. What is that adding up? Adding up in a sense, when we are incorporating all the economic activities and households, so we have to add up all the savings or leakage from the system should be equal to the investment of the economy. That is what the basic principle of macroeconomics is, that savings equals to investment. So even if we are working on the multi-sectoral model, when we'll, empirically prove or empirically model it, we should be careful that your accounting identity is valid. That means your savings equal to investment, and finally the national account as a benchmark. That means the GDP estimates from the multi-sectoral framework is identical to the total GDP estimate of the economy. That is number one. Number two is that there are many approaches of estimating gross domestic product for an economy. One is an income approach, another expenditure approach, another is a value-added approach. So all these approaches should be consistent if we are working on multi-sectoral model. So even if we are working on economy-wide model following the multi-sectoral framework, we are not ignoring the fact the macroeconomics taught us. Now, why economy-wide? So although we got to know with past few slides that what is the key importance of economy-wide model or economy-wide analysis for the policy decision, but still there is some additional fact we need to know before we move further. What are those facts? The fact is that if there is an increment or there is a growth in one particular sector, we know that there will be some direct impact of the people, those who are dependent on that particular sector. But often we ignore or we do not have tool to measure how that growth benefit or how that impact spill over to other households or other economic agents. Those are dependent on that sector, not directly but indirectly. Take an example. If agriculture sector grows, farmer will earn more money. Now what they will do with that money? They will spend into the market and they will demand for commodity which are their need for them or which are essential. It may be essential, it may be luxurious. But they will spend their earning on the market, and the market will sell that output, and market will get that output from the production process. So if a farmer buy a phone, the mobile phone company will get profit out of it. And that profit, to get that profit, mobile phone company need to invest on labor, on the material input, on the industry. So that is how we have a direct and indirect linkages. That's how, when we are talking about policy and modeling, we should consider this, that policymakers should be concerned with the whole economy. It's not like that only the direct impact which we are talking about. There are indirect impacts which are not intended, but that actually caused as an indirect effect due to linkages among the sector. And this is important for political economy as well. So we have a direct effect that is concentrated, and indirect effect is a widespread. Okay. Now let us, to begin the analysis, what we need is that we need to formulate a question. Question in a sense, a research question. Let us ask a question that if one unit output increases in manufacturing sector, what will happen to other sector? What will happen to the household income? So let us formulate a question. Then let us select a model, which model we want to use, and then we analyze the impact and then explain the result. So these are the 4 different steps one researcher or one student should follow while doing the policy modeling analysis. Or even any analysis it's not that always you have to follow the model thing, but any analysis, you have to formulate a question and then you have to identify which tool you should use. Since we are talking about economy-wide modeling, we will be focusing more on this model, that we have to find out which model we should use. So as I mentioned in beginning of my lecture that we will be more focusing on the linear model. So in this particular discussion, we'll be talking about the input-output model. We will start with, then we will consider the supply-use model, and finally we will consider the SAM-based model. Let us come to a point of simple input-output table. So what this table talks about? In this table, if you see, there are two rows of economic activities. That means the activities which produce goods for the consumption or used by the household and industry as well. It's manufacturing and agriculture. These two rows are there. And when we read the data across the row, say manufacturing row, we have 150, then 500, 250, and 900. What does it mean? That means that what is the flow of output of manufacturing sector across different sectors. Now, let us see the sector agriculture. The similar logic valid here, that what is the flow of agriculture sector output across different activities. The third one is value added. That means what? Value added is basically the payment for labor and capital. This is basically primary factor of input, which is supplied by the household, basically. So this is basically the flow of output, or in other words, we can say the receipt of payment by the sector. Now, if we look at the column, we have intermediate demand, that's manufacturing, agriculture, then final demand, then we have a gross output. Look at this. If we have last column, it's a gross output, and in the last row, we have total cost. And both are equal. So that means the gross output basically is a gross revenue, and here it is like total cost. So the first cell says that what is the dependency of manufacturing sector on manufacturing sector? That means manufacturing sector is consuming 150 unit as an intermediate input from manufacturing sector itself. Then we have a manufacturing sector dependent on agriculture for 200 unit as an intermediate input. And manufacturing sector is paying 550 rupees for labor and capital. And thus, its total cost is turning around 900. Finally, if we see the agriculture sector, also the same, that total 1,000 rupees is the total cost is paying, of which 400 rupees is towards the value added, and 600 rupees towards the intermediate, of which 500 for manufacturing and 100 for agriculture. So if we see these 550 and 400 are they directly goes to the household sector as an income. Now, when we see the final demand column, what it talks about is that the amount of output consumed by household or even government or by the foreign consumer as a final demand. So we got to know that there are two types of use of total output. One is an intermediate use and another is a final use. And thus the total output we obtain as a 900. So the basic fact which we arrived here is that the row and column total are equal. Now, income expenditure loop, let me explain in better way. So what does it mean? So see that the column manufacturing sector paying 550 rupees as a value added payment, that means payment towards labor and capital rent, and that income is going towards the final demand use. That means the income a labor earned or a household earned is spending on the commodity. So this is how, if we see the total value added is 950 and total expenditure they made is 950. This is a typical example. We will further move and we will further bifurcate the final demand. We'll try to understand more detail on it. So in a typical sense, when there is no savings, no other use of the earning. So whatever you are earning, you are spending. So that means 950 you are earning and you are spending entirely on the commodity. So this is how the basic input output table look like, and we need to understand it. So that means what we are trying to see here is that the value added is going towards the final demand, or you can say value added is creating the final demand, and then final demand is influencing the activity. So this is how your every sector will link with other sector. So now, when a few slides back I said that in the multi-sector modeling, the macroeconomic constraints need to be fulfilled. So this 950 rupees payment is basically payment for labor and to capital, and also the operating surplus plus taxes on the production. Then this 950 is the final demand, the demand by the household, government, investment, export and import. So let us assume that now in the final demand, we have all the demand included. So using this table, we can measure the GDP in 3 different approaches, and these 3 should be identical. That is what the basic principle of national income account. So the income method, it is basically 550 plus 400. It's basically nothing but the value added. Then we have expenditure, C plus I plus G plus X minus M. We already explained under the final demand, we are considering household demand, government demand, investment demand, and export minus input. So that is 950. Then output method is basically what? Sorry. Output method is your total output minus the intermediate. So we are getting the total GDP that to 950. So that if you look at the column 150 plus 200, then 550, we are getting 900. So what is the GDP basically? 900 minus 200 minus 150. So total output minus intermediate, we are getting that. So if you are working on an input output table, so you should be careful that input output table should be consistent with 3 different approach of GDP estimation. If not, then you have to look back your data construction procedure or data where you got the input output table. Now let us focus on the activity. So this basically manufacturing agriculture, the first 4 cell is basically inter-industry purchase. So end of the day, we are understanding the structure of input table. So the first 4 cell is inter-industry cell. Then we have primary input that I talked about the value added. Then we have inter-industry cell, final cell, and complete all record all the transactions. So thus we are recording all the transaction, and hence if we do that, we are getting that column total must equal to the row totals. So this is the basic of input output table using a demonstrative data or in a basic simple data. Now instead of data, if we use some symbol, how we can explain that? So let us start with some symbol. So that Z11 is basically the suffix 11 means the first one is the output of sector 1 is going to sector 1 as an input. So be careful on that. The suffix first is I and J, if we understand this way. So ith industry to jth industry. So that's how if we read the Z11 means first industry to first industry. Z21 second industry to first industry. Then similarly Z12 is the first industry to second industry. So this Z is the variable which takes into account inter-industry cell. Then V1 and V2 are the value added payment. Okay, and then final demand is F1 and F2 is basically the commodity specific. And finally, we got the X1 and X2, and here is the total cost C1 and C2. So we can do the mathematical analysis using this. Now we can add this column row. Why? Because this is homogeneous commodity. Manufacturing output is flowing across sector. So total X1 is equals to total inter-industry use Z11 plus Z12 plus F1. Similarly, we can do it for X2 also. So the material balance equation is X1 equals to what is total flow plus final demand, and similarly for the sector 2. Now in case of cost, we have to look at the column specific. So cost C1 is equal to Z11 plus Z21 plus V1, and then C2 is Z12 plus Z22 plus V. So if we see this both these equation in the first one, when we add up all the column, the X1 Z11 plus Z12 plus F1. So you just see that if Z11, Z2 remain same and F1 increases, then your X1 will also increase in the same amount. Or it will change in a different amount depending on the level of Z1 and Z2. That will come later. But there is a linear relationship showing that if there is changes in the right hand side, the left hand side will also change. Similarly, in the cost function, any item in this cost in the right hand side changes, there will change in the left hand side. So thus we got this cost of cultivation. Now, let us come to the production function. What kind of production function the input output table consider? So the production function we can derive from this table look like this. For manufacturing, X1 is function of Z11, Z21 and V1. So if we look at the column, it needs intermediate and the primary factor input labor and capital. Similarly for agriculture sector as well. So the production function looks like this, and what type of production function we'll see later. So using this information which I explained using this three table, using material balance equation, cost equation and production function, let us move towards the input output model. And every model has its own assumption. Here also we consider some assumption. One is that the final demand is exogenously given. Mostly we use this because the input output table which developed by Leontief is basically a demand driven model. So we say that demand is exogenous, and if demand changes, then how much output will be required to meet that excess demand. So then supply will be endogenously determined. And in this input model, it is considered that there is no capacity constraint. So if there is a demand increases, supply will also increase. And that means here price is neutral, or you can say price is fixed. Now, need to explain more about how these output are being produced. So the production function which I explained is X1 is equals to function of Z11, Z21 and V1, these three input. And so let us understand using this graph. We have in the horizontal axis manufacturing and agriculture. So 500 unit from manufacturing, 100 unit from agriculture, we are producing 1000 units. And if we increase 750, our output will not increase unless and until we increase the agriculture. Basically, we are saying that there is no substitution in it, and they are fixed coefficient. So if you double the input, your output will be double. Okay, and if you change one in input, it will not make much difference into the output because these both are a complement to each other. If you increase one, then other has to increase. So this is the typical Leontief demand, production function that we follow in the input output table, and it's a linear. So the production, when we are modeling the input table data, that means we are talking about no substitution of input. It's a L-shaped curve and it's a constant return to scale. So there means no economies of scale in a sense that there is no increasing return to scale or decreasing return to scale. If you double the input, your output will be double. And then it is a linear assumption, so which is easier to solve. Okay, so now let us move to the interpretation of the production function and further analysis. So in the input output table, which already I explained, so using the production function approach, what we can explain is that the 900 unit manufacturing output, say this denim shirt requires 150 unit manufacturing, that is basically the cloth we need will come from the textile sector, and then 200 unit input from agriculture sector, say indigo, and then 550 unit value. So using this commodity combination, we are producing this. Why I put all this in a quantity terms? Because here the critical factor comes in, that what is the unit of measurement of input. When we talked about the material balance equation, that if you remember that X1 equals to Z11 plus Z12 plus F1, that means we can add the item when they are either homogeneous, number one, or they are converted in terms of a value, a homogeneous unit. In a sense, either it is in a rupees or it is in a quantity. Now, if we consider this input table in a physical unit, we cannot add them up. We cannot add a cloth with the indigo or with the number of person. So we need to assign some value. And that value, when we are assigning, that means we need a price. Then what price it consider? So to understand that, let me explain this using this input table. That is there any questions? Let me just follow.
No, sir, you can continue.
I can continue, right? Okay. So if we see this production function, when we talk about here, if these values are in quantity terms, we really cannot add. So that means we need to convert them into value, then only we can add. So this is another principle we have to understand. Now, let us move towards the analytical part. Yes. So the basic question which we started this discussion is that we need to know what happens when output changes. Okay. So if there is a changes in any of the sector, in the output of any of the sector, then what will happen to the other sector? Then how to get into that? To get into that, we need to understand the coefficient of input and output coefficient. That will basically explain us how every sector depends. How we measure that? Let us take this example. Manufacturing is 150 unit of manufacturing output used by the manufacturing sector as an intermediate, and total output is 900. So if we divide 150 by 900, it gives us 0.17. This implies if we want to produce 1 unit of manufacturing sector output, we need 0.17 unit of manufacturing sector output as an intermediate and 0.22 unit as intermediate input from agriculture sector. And similarly, for agriculture sector also, we can estimate by dividing the intermediate input by total output. Remember, when we are estimating this coefficient, the column sum should equals to 1. So what this coefficient called? This is called the input requirement. That means, as we explained here, 0.17 is the input required to produce 1 unit. 0.150 input required by agriculture sector to produce 1 unit output. And input required from whom? Input required from manufacturing sector. So the input requirement, input output ratio basically define the input requirement, or we can say it's an unit coefficient, or we can say it's an technical coefficient, because these all determined by the technology. Input output coefficient we also use as a technical coefficient because it's a representation of a technology. If you have efficient technology, you need input less to produce more output. Okay, or we can just say it's a coefficient. Now, the direct input from activity in row I that is required, and per unit output of activity in column J. That's what I explained already when I mentioned the Z11, Z12. So that basically nothing but Zij. So ith sector's input is required for J sector output. So we can write it like this. Zij is basically the intermediate input required per unit of output. This is, if we say Z is total value and Q is quantity, then we can get into like that Qij multiplied by Pi. Why Pi? Because ith sector's output used by Jth sector as an input. So what is the price of ith sector? The Pi. Then divided by Pj and Qj. Qj is a Jth sector output that multiplied by the Pj. So can we say that this ratio, if I define the Zij by Xj as Aij, then can we explain that Aij equals to Qij by Qj? If we want to do that, that means Pi equals to Pj, right? But is it really rational to assume that Pi equals to Pj? That means you are saying that one smartphone that is rupees 5,000 is equals to one loaf of bread, that is rupees 20. But in input table, we basically use the normalized price. That price is unity. How we do that? Basically, we manipulate the unit. How? That implies that if we have 200, if the total intermediate use is 200 in terms of money, so that means 200 money is equivalent to 1. So that is how I explained in the last two, that measure 1 unit of bread as if it is 250, right? So then if we do that way, you are getting that price of bread equals to price of smartphone. That means suppose you have some price, actual price of the current year, say 10 rupees, and you are required 20 kg of input from that sector. So 20 multiplied by 10 rupees is basically 200 rupees. And we are assuming that 200 rupees is basically the 1 unit. So we are converting the 200 rupees as 1 unit, and hence the price of the 200 is 1. That means the entire value is converted into a quantity per price is unit. And here price is fixed in the input table. So when price is fixed, your change in output changes in the input. That means basically we are saying the real changes that is required. Okay, so we will gradually move further if there is substitution effect comes in, or what is the logic behind that. Now let us move back to the research question we asked while starting this discussion. What was that question? If there is rupees 10 or rupees 10,000, whatever be amount you can just assume, if there is a rupees 10 rise in demand for manufacturing, then how, with the help of input coefficient, you can say that there will be impact on the economy as a whole. So let us start with this. We have this coefficient matrix. So we know that to produce 1 unit output, we need 0.17 unit input from manufacturing, 0.22 unit from agriculture. So if rupees 10 unit demand for manufacturing, that means the manufacturing sector need to produce 10 unit output to meet that demand. That is how the terminology requirement comes in. And that's how we assume the excess capacity. This is basically a planning model. When suppose today you have a particular structure, okay, and you have all the capacity constant, everything, I understand. But when we talk about future, what we are planning basically, we are planning to invest. Number one, if we invest, our capacity will improve. Then we want to introduce a policy so that our demand boosts up. So if one works, how other thing will work. So this is how we need to understand. That is why this type of analysis help you to plan for future. And you know that your population is going to increase. So to meet the demand by the rising population, how much output you need so that you can meet the rising demand. Therefore, here the question is rupees 10 increase in manufacturing demand, that implies that you are demanding additional 10 unit of manufacturing output, and manufacturing sector is ready to produce that. If they produce, then there will be impact on other sectors. Like if we look at this coefficient, 1 unit produce of manufacturing output requires 0.17. So if it is 10 units, so additional 1.7 unit intermediate input we need from manufacturing sector itself, and 2.20 unit input from agriculture sector we need. So you understand this, if we are giving a shock into one industry, its impact is spilling out, or it's actually there is a spillover effect, and the impact is widespread. And finally, and then there will be 6.10 increase in value. But the story does not end here, because if your agriculture sector output increases, you will demand more intermediate demand. You will pay for labor and capital. Labor will spend that money into demand. So this is how the entire circle will continue, and we end up with a multiplier process. Okay, that's how I put up a question mark. That is that the end of the story? Basically, no. Okay, so let us understand where we end basically. So this is our basic coefficient matrix, and we are saying that there is a ₹10 increase in demand. So that means your manufacturing output will increase. So ₹10, its total output need to be increased. Then if we are increasing that, additional 1.70 unit output of manufacturing sector itself will increase. So ultimately we are ending up with 11.70 unit output. But on the other hand, agriculture sector output will increase by 2.20 unit. So if we see in the second round, 1.70 unit increase in manufacturing sector output will further boost manufacturing sector output and further agriculture sector. So this is way different round. If we move by one, we are ending up in a multiplier process. Just look at that. One single intervention have different impact. This is what the beauty of using the input-output model. So same thing you can repeat for agriculture sector as well. But issue is that understanding this way or working on this each and every stage is a tedious task. I have taken 2 sectors, I can explain it. But there are 100 sectors, 140 sectors. The government of India published input table, the latest supply use table government published for 2015-16 considered 140 sectors. So it will be like, your lifelong exercise to do such type of analysis. So there must be some method, we can use some algebra to reduce that labor of doing this multiplication rounding of different stage. So how to do that? The full system is like this. We are converting them into a symbolic term, and using this coefficient, we can write this. Manufacturing to manufacturing is A11 X1. I hope you understand. A11 is per unit input. A11 is input required per unit of output. So that means if you multiply with the total output, you are getting the total input. Okay. So we are converting them into an algebraic form, and we can write this in this way, that A11 X1 plus A12 X2 plus F1 equals to X1, and similarly for others. And if there are n number of sectors, you can write such n number of equations to make this input table into algebraic form. But that algebraic form we have to solve, and to solve that, the easiest way is a matrix. So when we have this type of equation, basically we are converting them into a matrix. Just if you know matrix multiplication, you multiply first row A11, A12 with the first column X1, X2. You are ending up with like this: A11 multiplied by X1 plus A12 multiplied by X2 plus F1 equals to X1. So ultimately, using the matrix method, we are converting the system of equation in a more efficient way to solve for it. Now this A11, A12 is a coefficient matrix, and let us name it A. Then universally people use this notation A to represent the coefficient matrix, and X is your total output matrix, and then F is your final use, and thus you are getting AX plus F equals to X. Now solve. So if we keep that F into left hand side, we are getting into X minus A multiplied by X, and finally with I minus A. I is basically identity matrix. And so finally, if we want to do that X as the endogenous variable, as I explained that in this input table, we assume final demand as your exogenous. So F is your exogenous and X is your endogenous. So if there is changes in F, X will change depending on what is the value of I minus A inverse. And this I minus A inverse is nothing but your multiplier. So basically what we are saying that in a linear also there is changes in final demand, there will be changes in output. And this coefficient remain constant. Basically economic structure will not change. So we are answering the question that given the economic structure, if there is an increase in output, increase in final demand, how much output will increase? Now interpreting this Leontief inverse. So this inverse basically a Leontief inverse in probability inverse. Coefficient matrix which I explained that with the notation A is basically direct impact on gross activity. Just remember 0.17, 0.22 was the direct coefficient for manufacturing sector. That means that is basically nothing your direct impact on the economy if 1 unit output increase by the manufacturing sector. But we want to estimate the indirect effect also. Had that been, had we have one interest to see the direct effect, I think we don't need input table. The beauty of input table is to estimate the indirect effect. Direct effect is a simple linear estimation. Anybody can do that. If agriculture sector requires, say, to produce 1 hectare paddy, you need 30 labor. And if you expand the number of area under paddy, you know that additional labor required. But additional labor requirement in agriculture sector will give additional income into the system. And that income will create more multiplier effect. That is what we want to estimate. This indirect effect we can estimate using this multiplier matrix I minus A inverse. So how to do that? So let us follow the round by round. So in the round 1, when we are saying that final demand for manufacturing sector will change by 10. So that means the output changes is by 10. So what is the extra output needed to meet rupees 10 in rise in demand? That is what we explained in the first. Now in the second, round 2, delta X is equal to A multiplied by delta F. It's basically the A is basically input output coefficient, and that will multiply to the changes in output. And this coefficient is basically 0.17, 0.22, which we estimated earlier. Why we are using that? Because it will tell that to produce 1 unit output, how much of different input we need. So that will tell that how much additional impact we are creating into the economy. So we are ending up with 1.7 and 2.20. So this is an indirect effect, the extra output needed to produce the extra output in round 1. So now remember that. The round 1 is basically this red circle, rupees 1.70, then rupees 2.20. Now the round 2, again, we have already increased output by 1.7 and 2.20. That will further boost up. And in the round 2, we will end up with 1.39 and 0.5. So this is additional output need to produce in the round 2. Just remember this. The previous knock-on diagram, and we can get that what additional output effect we can see from the changes in demand. So this is how we basically if we keep on doing, we'll get into that. That's how this I minus A inverse matrix tells us. This is basically nothing but an algebraic formation, and the solution for this last equation is I minus A inverse multiplied by delta F. This is a geometric series. Thus, we estimate the input-output inverse. Now, what is the interpretation? Based on the values for A, the Leontief inverse takes on the following. I minus A inverse is basically nothing but, if we use the original table, we can get that I minus A inverse is 1.41 0.78, 0.3. So this means that if there is an increase in demand by 1 unit in manufacturing sector, your total output will increase by 1.41 and 0.35. This is 1.41 is manufacturing output and 0.35 is agriculture sector output. Similarly, we can interpret that for the agriculture sector. So this is how we get this total effect. And if we just subtract it from the direct effect, we can get into the direct and indirect effect, or we can decompose the direct and indirect effect. So the IO multiplier analysis, to conclude, it shows direct and indirect economy-wide impact through inter-industry relation. It's better than narrow sector approach. Basically, it's better than the partial equilibrium kind of a thing. We have a multiple sector interaction, and it's a convenient, linear, and tabular form. You can do it in Excel as well, and it includes all information of input output. But some restrictive assumption is there. It's a fixed price and fixed coefficient. So if we are using the input output table for policy analysis, we have to be careful about the assumption of the model. This model does not consider the price inflation. Second thing is that a model does not consider the structural change, because one table represents one structure. One table cannot change the multiple structure. But obviously, if you change the coefficient, that means you are changing the structure and your result will come. So far, we have analyzed the demand. Now let us move towards the supply use table approach. If you recall my introductory lecture, I explained that 3 topics I would like to cover. One is this input output table and its implication and its multiplier analysis. Then I'll move towards supply use table, and further we'll move towards this social accounting metrics. The supply use table, before we go there, let us understand this, that the input output table, what we explained till now, talks about or consider only the commodity. We did not have any specification of activity. We have manufacturing commodity, we had agriculture commodities. So basically, the demand changes which we talked about so far using input table is nothing but the demand for that commodity. But we need to expand the scope. How this commodity being produced, how different activity are linked with this commodity. So to move further one step, or I would say to move one step ahead on the value chain. So far we explained the commodity that has been produced by somebody else and the commodities being demanded by the household. Now we are adding up one more dimension here, is the activity. Specifically, in the previous IO table, there was activity, but it was included within the agriculture and manufacturing commodity. We did not have an explicit estimation of activity. What will help that? It will help how domestic production will increase, because production and supply both are different concepts. Production is the output to producing domestically, it's a domestic production. If there is an excess demand than production, what we do? We import from external economies or foreign countries. So total supply is equals to production plus import. On the other hand, whatever we produce, a part of it goes to the domestic sell, means selling within the geographical territory of the economy, within the household sector, and a part will go to the external sector as an export. So if both equate, that means we say the supply equals to demand. But we need to understand this. We need to create an empirical evidence. We need to understand empirically, not only theoretically. So the supply use table framework look like this. We had intermediate use. We are already now familiar with this intermediate use. That is basically, we taught that commodity framework. But here, when we are introducing activity and commodity, so what is the role of introducing activity is that activities are those who are really using the intermediate input and paying for value added. They are the producing unit. And commodity are the output from this activity. So if we look at the first column, activity, they are linked with commodity, wage salary, gross operating surplus, net indirect taxes. So thus we are ending up the total cost of cultivation or cost of production. The second column, we have a connection between activity and commodity. That means activity producing a particular commodity. And this commodity is paying some tax. Basically, we are paying sales tax. You can say now we are having GST in India, and then we are importing commodity. And then we are getting the total supply. And this total supply, the commodity, is going to activity and then final demand, export, and we are getting total use. So if you see the chain, how it is happening, if domestic final demand increases, it will increase domestic supply, and then commodity will depend on the activity, or commodity of that particular activity will increase, and then activity will demand more intermediate input. They will pay for more labor, or they will hire more labor, and they will pay for tax and other things. This is how your demand will link with your production and supply side. So that is what the advantage of using supply use table is, that you are introducing one dimension, that is a supply side dimension, who are producing the total commodity. Now multiplier. So let us have this prototype supply use table. Agriculture sector producing agricultural commodity 279 unit, and manufacturing sector producing manufacturing unit. It's a two activity, two commodity framework. Remember, if we read through this activity to commodity, this is basically the supply matrix. That means the supply of a commodity from different activity. And this matrix is largely diagonal matrix. That means agriculture sector is producing agriculture and manufacturing sector is producing manufacturing. If we have a multiple sector, multiple activity and multiple commodity, you may see that single activity can produce more than one commodity. In that case, this table may not be like your diagonal matrix. There can be some off diagonal element that are basically nothing but some byproduct of a particular activity. Okay, we can take an example of iron and steel sector. Iron and steel sector not only produce iron and steel, they also produce some amount of electricity. That means in one industry producing two commodity, two output. So that means multiple product, if one activity doing, then what will happen? If demand for electricity increases, iron and steel sector will also grow, because they will feel profitable to sell electricity than iron and steel. So their electricity department will expand. That is how the entire industry will expand. So there are many multiple product or joint product production industries are there as well. But for simplification, we are using that one commodity, one activity, means one-to-one mapping. So this is how it looks like. This 71 is a demand for agricultural commodity, and this total output 279 is going to agriculture and manufacturing, the intermediate, and also for final demand. And then this manufacturing sector is also, this intermediate input is further pushing the agriculture activity sector's output. This is how this circle will continue, and we are ending up with another multiplier. So the way we set up, similar way we can set up this using the supply and commodity matrix. We can, instead of A, we can redefine the matrix B, which will be a output mix or commodity mix matrix. Okay, instead of A, there will be another coefficient, which is like what is the share of different activity producing one commodity. Then what would be the share of different commodities producing one activity. So you will end up with similar type of equation where B is basically inter-industry matrix and F is final demand. So if you change that, your total output will change. This is how we can use the supply use table for multiplier analysis. And so this is how we are doing that. Production in coefficients are formed in usual. This is the way we define this. The total aggregate commodity, how much is domestically produced and how much is imported. Then ratio of domestic supply, total supply is constant. So 0.97, 0.71 is constant. That means if 1 unit commodity demand increases, 97% will be domestically demand and 0.3 or 3% is basically imported. So this structure remains same. We will analyze how much, what will be the impact on the economy if there is an increment in household demand. In the similar fashion like before, we can interpret the supply use table in terms of this algebraic notation. And the equation will look like this. The first is C11 multiplied by C1. That means this particular activity, how much they are producing. So this entire square matrix part we can write in this, and that can be converted into the matrix. The first row C11, C12 is basically commodity 1 from the activity 1, commodity 2 from the activity 2, and it is a diagonal. Then A11 is a similar interpretation, intermediate input 1, and it's going to intermediate sector 1. And finally, we are ending up with this type of equation at delta X equals to I minus B inverse of F. How we are interpreting this here, supply use table inverse. So that means if there is any changes, so with the impact ₹1 increase in exogenous demand for manufacturing commodity, how much of different sector output is changing. This is how we see 0.17 is delta X1, means output of industry 1 or activity 1. Delta X2 is output of industry 2 or activity 2. And then 0.71 is the commodity supply and 1.25 is commodity. So activity output multiplier is 1.05 by adding 0.17 plus 0.88, and commodity supply multiplier is 1.4. And commodity multiplier is higher than the output multiplier, activity output multiplier. Why? Let us understand this by one round. So this is first is we are increasing by 1 unit. What will happen in the round 1, manufacturing sector commodity will increase. In the round 2, it will increase the manufacturing sector activity in terms of intermediate demand. Then agriculture sector commodity required intermediate, then agriculture sector output is required. So then one agriculture sector output is required, then in the round 4, we see that agriculture sector activities output will increase by 0.10 and 0.13. If we see manufacturing sector commodity is increasing by 0.18, and here manufacturing sector output is increasing by 0.13. So in this every round, if we see the output increase is more than the output from the domestic industry, 0.7. So if we do that gradually, we see that the activity output increase is lesser than the commodity. In a simple way to understand is that the commodity is linked more with different industries than this activity. This activity has a one-to-one correspondence. One activity is producing one commodity. If one activity produces multiple commodity, then output multiplier will also increase, because that sector output will increase proportionately the amount of other commodity that activity produces. And if they, since they are not producing, so but commodity is linking with everything, all other sectors. Okay, so if commodity increases, then it will increase the demand. Then, but at a slower speed, not like it is increasing output. Now let us understand some amount of socio-economic aspect. That is basically the one example I would like to give you on employment and other external multiplier. So policymaker also concerned about the employment, and using input table we can do the employment multiplier. What does it mean? It means that if there is an increment in demand for one commodity, it will obviously increase the activity output and it will increase the demand for labor. How much that is, at what, or you can say what types of labor it will demand. It depends on the types of labor you have. Sometimes we use a single labor. That means basically we aggregated level of labor. Sometimes if you have a detailed information about different skill wise labor, you can do that, like low skill, high skill. Okay. And if you have data on like whether they are own account worker, whether they are casual labor, you can do that. So how we do that? To do that, using input table, we assume that the labor requirement per unit of output is fixed. That means here also we are assuming the constant into scale. So if you want to increase your output, your employment will increase. It's not like that there is an increasing return to scale or decreasing return to scale, right? So then, what is an employment ratio? Employment ratio is the total employment you have. You can get that employment in quantity terms as well. Say number of hours employed. Okay. So if you divide by total output, it will say that, say 20 hours labor required to produce 1 unit, 1 rupee output of a particular sector. So that is how you can estimate the total number of hours required, and total number of hours will be required if there is an increment in output by 1 additional unit. So look at this, the 56 hours and 39 hours are the labor required by 2 activities. And here it is 0 because this commodity supply. Here it is not the production, it is a supply, distribution. And the total output is this, okay? And then employment to output ratio is 0.2, 0.1. So that means if there is rupees 10 increase in output, it will employ 2 workers by the agriculture sector, and manufacturing sector will employ 1 worker. So thus, if agriculture sector output is up by 10, employment will up by 2, and demand for labor will increase. But in a similar way like before, the multiplier process, as we explained, it will continue increase. And finally, we end up like this. So how we do that? Look at your supply use table multiplier. If there is 1 unit increase in manufacturing sector output lead to 0.17, 0.88, 0.17, these are your multiplier value. And if we multiply that with your coefficient of employment, we end up with this. So this is basically if there is increment in 1 unit demand, then this much output, additional output will be produced, and to produce 1 unit output, how much employment was required. So if we multiply that, we get to know that how much additional employment will be created if there is increment in 1 unit output of a particular sector. So this is how we link the increase in demand with the output and further with the employment. So this is how intersectoral linkages gives us a better picture of not only the direct effect, but also the indirect effect. So the first session on the input output table and supply use table is end here. Now I will move to the another session, or it's the final session of this discussion, is social accounting matrix. Is there any questions? Can I go?
One question is there.
Yeah.
Ganga Devi, she is asking, sir, how the Walrasian general equilibrium model will work for an economy. Hello.
Hello.
You can see that question also, sir. Q&A section. Bottom at the bottom. Maybe I think you have to stop this screen sharing, then you can able to view them.
Okay. See, actually, I hope you have gone through the question. I could not, but for the sake of time, let me answer her questions. Let me compliment her for this excellent question. Although we have not touched upon the Walrasian theory till now, because this topic, first of all, is a quite widespread topic, and before anybody understand this CG model and nonlinear framework, we need to understand this. But I would be happy to answer her question. Is that the CG model basically based on the Walrasian general equilibrium theory, that's a neoclassical theory, and it's based on the perfect competition and constant return to scale theory. Number one. Number two is that in the Walrasian theory, we say that if there are n number of markets and if n minus 1 markets are in equilibrium, then nth market is also in equilibrium. Basically, in CG model, we incorporated into this that we use basically in CG model, what we do that we do not estimate the actual price for commodity. Rather, we estimate the relative price. Okay. So relative to some say price of manufacturing sector relative to the agriculture sector. That means what? When we are estimating the relative price, that means that if there are n minus 1 sector is in equilibrium, that nth sector will also already be in equilibrium in a technical sense, if we understand that. Okay, so I must say that we are not going to touch in detail about the Walrasian theory, but if we look at the input-output table and all, Leontief theory, there we have assumed the constant return to scale assumption. Okay, and here I have assumed that it's a price fixed. That means it's a perfect competition. Means the producer they know that what is the demand they can produce. They cannot determine what is the price they need. Okay, and there will be no substitution in it so that they cannot beat the competition. So the coefficient you have fixed. So you cannot change that coefficient unless there is a technological intervention happens. And once this technological intervention happens, there will be structural change. Okay. So that is how we interpret this. I hope I tried to explain her question on it. And if there is any further question based on the past few slides explanation, we can explain that in further also. But without stopping.
Yes, sir. We can proceed for further talk.
Yes. Yes. So let me introduce the concept called social accounting matrix. Why we should teach or we should learn the social accounting matrix? Because if you could follow my input-output table or input-output analysis in past few slides, you see I talked about activity, I talked about commodity, I mentioned about the value added, and that value added goes to the household. But that input table does not consider the entire circular flow of income. That means what? The input table is not a square matrix first. Technically, if we see, because we have a value added row, but which households earning from how much from labor and how much from capital? We have single household here. If we have a multiple types of household, take example, self-employed in agriculture, self-employed in non-agriculture, casual labor, regular wage employee. 4 different types of household. And if we further classify into rural and urban, there will be further. We know total value added. Even if we take a further detailed assumption, we know how much of the labor wage a sector paid and how much of capital rent a particular sector paid. But who will receive that payment? That household. Now, how that will flow, that is not captured into the input table. To capture that, we need this social accounting matrix. It's basically social aspect we want to include. Second thing is that we don't know the leakage of the economy. What are those leakage? The savings. We know what is the total investment demand. That means the inventory demand. If one sector produce output, it not only used by the industry as an intermediate, it also used by the household as a final demand. It also used by the industry as an intermediate input. In other words, if we say, being a producer, if I sell 100 rupees in a year, of these 100 rupees, I paid say 30 rupees for that 100 rupees sale which I made. Of that 100 rupees sale, I earn 30 rupees from the industries who purchase commodity from my, from me as in their intermediate. 20 or 30 rupees say I got money from household who bought commodity. And also rest of the money I got from the industry themselves who bought those commodity as their capital goods, as an inventory investment. Let us say the tractor industry. Total sale of the tractor is some of the like agriculture sector purchase that basically goes to their capital. So tractor industry total output goes to the investment. That we have incorporated into it. But if we add all these inventory, we end up with a terminology called gross fixed capital formation, which we generally use as an investment. Now, who will finance that? That will finance from the savings. Aggregate gross fixed capital formation means aggregate savings must be equal to aggregate investment. So, in the input table, we have this gross fixed capital formation, but we do not have information on the savings. Savings by household, savings by the households, savings by government, and foreign savings as well, like current account deficit and the external transactions, net external transaction with the rest of the world. So this information we need to incorporate, then only we capture the circular flow. Before I proceed further, I would like to recall the circular flow of income which we learned during our undergraduate course. Let us start with a closed economy. Look at this linkage. The product market is basically this product market is what? They sell output product to the activity and they get revenue. And then activity pay for the factor market, labor and capital. This factor market basically gives return to the household because households are the supplier of labor and capital. It depends on the capital endowment of a household, how much capital return they will get. If I own 50% share of an industry, that means I have a right to get 50% profit of that industry. If I spend 8 hours labor to an industry, I have a right to get wage of equivalent to 8 hours of my service. So whether I am supplying labor, whether I have a capital endowment, or I have both, it will determine how much income I will have. Part of that income I will pay to the government as a tax and I will save. When I am saving, basically I am withdrawing money from the system. That's what in macroeconomic term it is called leakage. Further, government, they also spend on the product market. Like if we see the Food Corporation of India, or recently, given this pandemic COVID-19 situation, government announced that distribution of free food to the poor. How it will do? Government will purchase food from the food producer, and they will supply it to the poor people. So government is spending on the product market. Then also government saves some amount of money. That is basically the fiscal surplus. If there is a fiscal surplus, there is savings positive. If deficit, negative savings. Then, so this saving basically, in one word, it's a leakage, and other word it is injection. If you remember your macroeconomic, if savings increases, then that addition savings basically increases the capital supply. So if there is a banking system into the market and household saves their money in the bank, bank will use household saving to provide loan to the activity or production sector. They will expand. And then we have a foreign currency reserve with the RBI. Using that foreign currency reserve also, RBI can print money. Or we can also borrow. Government can borrow by keeping some amount of reserve with the Reserve Bank of India, or directly can borrow. So this is how your savings will transform into investment, and your entire system will be in equilibrium when savings is equivalent to investment. So this is how your entire system is linked. Now there are some linkages which are not linked with production as well. If we see government to household, there are some linkage with the transfer. Now, there are many talk is going on that government should introduce transfer income, minimum income transfer. In macroeconomic theory, we know that the transfer payment is not included in national income accounting. So if government say transfers 60,000 rupees per annum to a particular household, so will that account into GDP? As per theory, no. But that 60,000 rupees earning which poor will get, poor will spend into the market, and that will give you additional return. So this is how it is linked. So the multiplier process will have multiple dimensions, which is not captured in the input table. Now, how we derive SAM from the circular flow? So we have already explained the product market, activity, factor market, and household. So why it is SAM? SAM is a double entry accounting system. Income of one agent is basically expenditure of another. So I am earning wage, that means somebody is spending wage. SAM is efficient for accounting because single entry is required. And if we take an example of two activities and one household, let us start with this. Two activities. The current account says that what is the sale of output, intermediate sale, investment, and then final consumption, buying of goods, intermediate buy, and paying wages and rent. So this is by the industry. Capital account, basically industry borrow from the household and buying in for investment. Then household, we have household also sell. Household use their endowed labor and they sell their capital and they buy consumption. And the capital account is basically savings and lending. Whatever you have saved, you can lend. So if we take this example, so if we see there is activity A, the first top one, activity A, purchase 10 rupees as an intermediate from sector B, and then pay wages of 5 rupees. And then intermediate sale to B is 15 and final sale to household is 50. Investment good is 5. So this total output comes like this. You have, so let me put entire picture, it will be best to understand. So the activity A is paying for 10 rupees as an intermediate, wage payment for 5 rupees and profit is 20. So total cost of production basically is 35. Then on the other hand, it's selling output to B and sell household, then investment good. So your total production is total sale. And so investment goods from B, it's basically capital account. Sector A is purchasing investment good from B, and that is 10 rupees. And then basically how we are doing, we are borrowing the income. So this is basically investment is nothing but the borrowing. And then activity B is similar way, is get total output is their cost of cultivation and total 45 rupees is their total value of sale. So if we put these two wage payment in a national account, we get this 15 rupees is your wage and total profit is 40. And thus we get that similarly, if we put the total output minus intermediate, we end up with this similar 40 and 50. So this is how, using the intersectoral linkage, we can estimate GDP using income approach, expenditure approach, and finally we can end up into a matrix form of social accounting matrix. So this is basically the accounting rule. We can plot all these figures into a matrix form. So look at this. Household will earn from this, then this 15 rupees is intermediate, 15 rupees goes to the household, then 5 rupees under capital, and thus for each account we are ending up with a total expenditure equal to total income. Let me move further. So the social accounting matrix is basically the primary data format for all the CGM model, and that's what I explained in the beginning, that the linear representation of input, output, and social accounting matrix basically is the basic for CGM. And in its social accounting matrix accounts for activity, industry, sectors, it takes into account production, factors of production, and most importantly, it takes into account institutions and savings and investment. That's what I explained so far. So we can further disaggregate the activity based on the data available to us. So I'll not put much emphasis on it because we are running out of time. But the similar way, I already explained that the labor, you can include different skill type, and also gender you can include. You can include social group like SC, ST, and other. You can include formal, informal capital, land also you can include. And then some standard institutions are household, government, rest of the world, and enterprise, corporations. Household, in general, we distribute in terms of location, rural, urban, according to decile class also, according to education class also. You can do, like we can see if there is any increment in activity in service sector, whether it will be more educated people will get employment or uneducated people, because in India we have young educated, unemployment is more. So using a social accounting matrix by disaggregated household sector of education level can give us some picture about what would be our investment plan to get more educated, unemployed get employment. And then government disaggregated various tax account we can bring, but nowadays we have only single tax, the GST, but still we have some amount of excise duty and import duty. We can bring those difference in different account. Also we can account for subsidy. So when we are in constructing social accounting matrix, like before in improved table also, we have to take into account savings equals to investment. And this is the typical format of social accounting matrix. So in the commodity to activities and intermediate cell, which are there in the improved table, but the institution sector, which I already explained, institution and factor, this is a new addition into SAM, which tells us the distribution of factor income across different institutions. That includes household, government, and also rest of the world. Because we also hire labor from rest of the world, and also our labor goes to the rest of the country. So their net income is also included here. And thus we get a complete square matrix, and hence it is a complete circular flow. So with the permission from chair and with the permission from the host, let me stop my discussion here. If there is any further question, I would like to answer, and it was really interesting, and I would like to know, is there any question? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. At the bottom, sir, you can see one or two questions are there. Q&A section.
I have to stop sharing.
Yeah, I stopped it already.
Okay, can you read and tell me, because there are many comments here. Many comments.
Okay, that is in chat, but in Q&A section, that is fourth icon at bottom. Again, Ganga Devi, she is asking, what is the basic difference between general equilibrium analysis and social accounting matrix?
So the basic difference is social accounting matrix is a linear framework and computable general equilibrium model is a non-linear framework. So in social accounting matrix, it follows the same principle of input-output multiplier model, that is basically price, fixed. But in CG model, we do not consider price fixed. Price we determine endogenously. But as I mentioned earlier, relative price we estimate. We do not estimate actual price, and the substitution effect we bring into account, because here our production function is Leontief linear production function, but in CG model people use constant elasticity substitution type function or Cobb-Douglas production function, or in fact you can use Translock production function depending on the parameter value available to you. So this is the basic difference in it. You can bring the substitution effect in CG model, but not in the social accounting matrix model. Any other question?
Sir, it's question from JS Kumbar, and he's asking for computation of SAM, which software is used.
So see, thing is that the social accounting matrix, we do not need any software, only Excel can do that. And if you want to read further, there are many articles published in journal called Economic System Research. It's an international journal where it is published, and you can follow some book by Indian author A.M.R. Saluja, also published a book on concept and construction of social accounting matrix. Some articles I also published, so you can follow that. Basically, the foundation of social accounting matrix is input-output table, which published by Government of India Central Statistical Office. Latest supply use table is for 2015-16, and social accounting matrix is basically 2012-13, which we published, and it's available as a working paper also. So you can follow that. We do not need any hardcore software for that. Simple Excel, you can do that. Any further question?
I think questions are over. Maybe, okay. Jaya Jayanti is asking, is there any limitation for using number of activities and commodities under GEM?
There is as such no limitation. If you have data, you can do that. But the supply use table, government published, consider 140 commodities and 66 activities. So if you want further bifurcation of activities and commodities, you need to have data on intermediate use, their flow of output across different sectors. In general, people do not take that risk unless they have sufficient, project funding, some like that, or if some student to work on it, or somebody wants to do some analysis, 140 sector classification is enough to do that.
Okay, sir. Sir, we'll stop here. Right now, Dr. Suresh Pal, Director, National Institute of Agriculture Economics and Policy Research, has joined us. Sir, we welcome you in this webinar. And now I request you to give a remark about this webinar series. Sir, unmute yourself, sir. Unmute yourself, sir.
So let me first thank Dr. Vinayak, Dr. Manu for taking this initiative and completing it successfully. Before I make some general remarks, let me also thank Dr. Varun Dev Pal for excellent presentation. Really amazing to see that we have such a, talent in all the, let's say, the quantitative method in ICR system. And personally, I have heard some of, let's say, last part and initial part of your lecture. So really outstanding. You have very simple way explain the generally what people consider it's a black box general equilibrium model, but it's a very simple.
Thank you.
And with the kind of, let's say, the computation facilities we have now, so it is possible to do it. And we are planning to take this kind of exercise further, and certainly will take your help for building the work in this particular area. I'm sure ISRI is appreciating the expertise you have and certainly the work which you are doing, and we'll be happy to join forces and have a common program in this particular area, because in our system, not many people are working on these kind of modeling exercise. So really appreciative. Thank you for your efforts, and maybe sometime later we can, when we follow it, you can have let's say little exercise on this. You can, there are some examples, some of our colleagues can help you give those examples. They have used it, publications, and that will be useful particularly for the beginners, those who want to develop this kind of expertise. So thank you, Dr. Varun Devpal. Really, I'm still happy to see that there are about 80, let's say, the participant. I'm sure thousands will be listening on the Facebook. Thank you very much. Thank you again,
Thank you.
Dr. Vinayak and Dr. Abhimanyu, for your efforts. And really, I thought that let's start with this, because there is always demand for quantitative methods. And I was not, let's say, the expecting such a huge response from the colleagues and the students. What I see, you start few hundreds direct login on the Zoom platform, and thousands they are viewing on the Facebook. So really, it's very, very encouraging. And I thank both of you for really learning this new skill, connecting people through this Zoom platform. And certainly they might have benefited from this. And this is one program, we continue to do it. And if there is demand from, let's say, the participants, so maybe we can have more focused program, and those who are willing to take it further, so that will be happy to support that exercise. Friends, let me again thank for their response. For all the sessions, the response is very, very encouraging. So as I said in the beginning, the purpose of this particular activity was to link the faculty, students with the expertise we have within our system, particularly in ISRI, NIAP, and maybe IRI also, 3 institutes, we have drawn the faculty. So once we have established this kind of linkage, we have provided some kind of exposure to students and the faculty members, we expect that this will be really useful to them for their teaching purpose. Also, those who are interested, they can take some research work, they can give some assignment to their students, a student can use in their research work. And certainly, if there are some questions, some doubt, so they can get back to the respective resource person, so that if there are some doubt, that can be addressed. So that was our purpose, to link researchers with the expertise we have. And I'm confident, I mean, I'm sure that we have been successful in terms of establishing this linkage. And in the time to come, this linkage will become more stronger, more useful, and it will be really seen in terms of better publication, more analytical methods. Friends, this is the time when we have a lot of information, lot of data, very good computational facilities. In fact, when we started our career, these facilities, certainly they were not there. Even running a regression was taking weeks together, even months together. But now that exercise, we can do it. We can attempt like a general equilibrium model. We can also attempt very sophisticated models. So friends, let's take advantage of this positive situation where we have all data available on net, whether it is from MOSPI, whether it is from Ministry of Agriculture or any government department, data are available on the net, so we can make use of these data. And the expertise available, computational facilities available. So certainly, if we make use, it is going to improve our research quality, robustness of analysis, and the conclusions we drive from our, let's say, the research results. So I expect more collaboration between the researchers. I expect more collaboration between, let's say, the resource persons and those who are working in different institutes or state agriculture universities. And I would like to see, in fact, I'll be very happy to see that if more good research articles, they are appearing in our professional journals, in economics, in statistics, in extension also. Basically, Dr. Vinayak is from extension, but the kind of initiative he has taken, certainly this is an example for others how initiative they can take, and they can improve the analytical content of their research work, their analysis. So certainly it will improve quality of our research work. So I hope that things will improve. People will get connected. They will be corresponding with each others, and we'll see more good quality papers in the journals. We have journals from ISRI we are bringing out. We have one journal, Agriculture Economic Research Review. We have Economic and Political Weekly. We have a journal from the Extension it is coming out. We have Indian Journal of Agriculture Economy. Number of journals they are there. And I expect that there will be more contributions from our ICAR SAU systems or those who have participated in this conference. So thank you very much for your interest and the participation of all the resource persons whomsoever we contacted. So they have responded very positively. So I also take this opportunity thank each one of the resource persons for taking time, because using this media, demonstrating the exercise, it requires a lot of skills and patience. And I am really happy that they have all responded positively, and whatever was expected, they have delivered more than the expectations. So I thank each one of the speakers for their time and the input they have provided. All these lectures, they are available on the Facebook, certainly. YouTube also, Dr. Vinayak, you will be putting. So they will be available. So whenever anyone want to revisit these, so that opportunity is also there. So thank you everyone who has contributed to success of this program. Finally, considering the response to this particular program, we are now moving to the next stage. And that next stage is, so in this program, we focus on quantitative methods. So next stage, we are focusing on agriculture development issues. So bringing their senior researchers, policymakers, so that they can share their thoughts, their development related issues, what they consider important, and what are the, let's say, the real research issues where the young researchers, they can take up for further analysis and research. So with this, again, we are starting through this platform a lecture series on agriculture. And first lecture, which we are going to have, it is on 24th of this month. So we have a break of Vinayak 3 days, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. No? Yes. Then Wednesday, 24th, we are starting. And we are able to contact two very senior persons who have very kindly agreed to speak. One is Dr. Rameshan and another is Dr. Harsh Bhanwala. So they will be speaking, one will be speaking on the development, agriculture development policy issues, and second will be speaking on the role of financial institutions. Because in economic package, they have emphasized the financing, refinancing, infrastructure development, and their role of financial institution is very, very important. So with that in mind, we have invited these two very senior I would say the persons to speak to our faculty members, to speak to students, so that they can get first-hand idea what are the current issues related to development of Indian agriculture. And this series will continue. In each session, we'll have 2 to 3 speakers. They will based on their experience. So journal will also try to have speakers from the international institutions, so they can also share their perspective. And I am hopeful that that this particular series also will be of equal interest to all our colleagues and the students who have participated in this particular activity on quantitative method for social sciences. So with this, I again thank everybody for their participation, response. We'll be very happy to receive suggestions on this program or any other activity, lecture series, or any other thing which we can organize through this kind of a platform. So definitely that will help us in better organizing our activities and to get in connected with the faculty members and students. So thank you everyone for your participation, for your contribution, and certainly NIAP look forward to always to your suggestions and the collaboration, of course, so that we can contribute together in a much more productive way. Thank you very much. All the best. Over to you, Dr. Vinayak.
Thank you very much, sir, for your kind words of appreciation and encouragement. That is really great source of inspiration and motivation for younger generation. Thank you, sir. I also thank Dr. Varun Dev Pal for explaining CG model in simple and interesting way, and of course showing practically some practical aspect also. Sir, we are getting very good response both from Zoom as well as Facebook for your lecture. We are really grateful to you for today's session. Thank you very much. As dear participants, as director sir told, next week onward, we will be coming with special lecture series. I request all of you to join us on 24th June to listen to Professor Ramesh Chand from Niti Aayog and Professor H.K. Banwala from former chairman NABARD. Thank you very much for active participation and learning. We will meet on 24th June. Till then, goodbye from all team of NIAP. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.